Regional conflicts and human rights are closely intertwined. They are issues of moral conscience. They are issues of international security. Because when a government abuses the rights of its own people, it is a grim indication of its willingness to commit violence against others.
Last month, President Reagan called on the Soviet Union to comply with the human rights provision of the Helsinki Accords, a provision the Soviet Union and 34 other countries agreed to in 1975.
Two of the most basic rights that we've called on the Soviets to comply with under the Helsinki Accords are the right to emigrate and the right to travel. How can we help but doubt a government that mistrusts its own people and holds them against their will?
For years, the Soviet Union dismissed charges it was not living up to its commitments under the Helsinki Accords. The agreement calls on the signatories to honor basic human rights, the right to free speech, the right to freedom of religion, the right to leave one's country. In the months leading up to the Moscow summit, it became clear neither side expects to sign a treaty this spring to cut strategic weapons.
We will continue our effort with strategic arms negotiation if we don't reach agreement by the time of the summit.
The day U.S. Secretary of State George Shultz delivered that message to the NATO allies, White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater said other issues, human rights and regional conflicts, would receive heavy attention in Moscow this spring. The annual Human Rights Report by the U.S. State Department records violation after violation of basic human rights by the Soviet government. But this report also notes some changes that occurred in the Soviet Union last year. Changes in the way the Soviets handled dissent, and a greater tolerance for protest and protesters. Before Soviet leader Gorbachev came to Washington last December, Jewish groups demonstrated for the freedom of Soviet Jews. 8,000 Soviet Jews were allowed to leave for the West last year, the greatest number since the 1970s. And this year, the number is expected to be even higher. In addition, 14,000 ethnic Germans and 3,000 Armenians were granted exit visas. The Soviets have also introduced laws to prevent psychiatric abuse.
They've been releasing some dissidents from mental hospitals, but by no means all. And they have introduced new legislation about the rights of mental patients with the aim of trying to prevent completely unjustified psychiatric internments of dissidents.
Soviet scholar Peter Redaway says it is too early to tell how effective these reforms will be. Church-state issues are also the focus of attention as the Soviet Union celebrates its millennium of Christianity.
The core of human freedom is religious liberty or freedom of conscience.
George Weigel is the president of the James Madison Foundation, which addressed an appeal for religious freedom in the Soviet Union. This church is being built in Washington by Ukrainian American Catholics. The Ukrainian Catholic Church is one of the churches outlawed in the Soviet Union. Last year, Ukrainian Catholics made an appeal for legal status for their church. Some of those who made that appeal were later harassed by authorities.
I believe the key test of glasnost, openness, and perestroika restructuring Mr. Gorbachev's program will be the degree to which religious organizations are allowed to play a part in recreating a civil society in the Soviet Union.
New Soviet laws are being written concerning church-state relations and other human rights issues. The laws are expected to be drafted in time for the Communist Party conference this spring. At that time, the West will get a glimpse of how far the Soviet Union wants to proceed in the area of human rights and personal freedom. Carol Pearson, WorldNet News.